Okay, we all ready? Anyone? First of all, I want to thank you all for the emails. I think we're pretty much figured it out, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Although I'm reminded of, in my second book, I used quotes from a guy named Rod McEwen. Anyone heard of Rod McEwen? Old poet and gravelly-voiced singer, a long time ago, folks. In any event, I used one of his quotes back in 1968, cruising around on the beaches off of Vietnam. I was reading some of his poetry, and he had a line in one of his books that said, "If you had listened hard enough, you might have heard what I meant to say." And I thought that was a pretty good quote. It's going to be apropos to what we're going to talk about in a little bit. But when I wrote that, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what book it was in. I had long since lost the book, but remembered the quote, and we got him on the phone, or we called, tracked him down in order to get permission to use the quote, and he answered his own phone and said, "Yeah," and asked him whether he could, whether I could use the quote, and I gave it to him, and he said, "Yeah," and I said, "But I don't know what it's from." And he said, "Okay, 1 second, wait a minute." And he was gone a couple of minutes, and he says, "You know, that sounds like some of the shit I wrote in the 60s. I said, "I don't remember what it was either, but go ahead and use it." So that's how you get permission nowadays for copyright stuff. So, but I know what I told you, but I didn't know what you heard, and the email is a good vehicle to see. Did I say that, or I didn't even intend to say that? Well, a few of you, one of the things that I was reminded of is that when we were speaking about dependent, independent, and interdependent, okay, one needs to remember. Well, actually, I didn't say it, so you might not have remembered, but that there are, certainly in the way I would defined it, dependency is a pathology. It's perfectly understandable, empathetic, or a fact jack in the physical world that we are all dependent at various stages in our life, okay? And we somehow all get out of it. And I guess by my definition, I said that it's through the grace of God and other folks that you get out of it. But when push comes to shove, whether they put you in the situation, whether you sink or swim, to use a naval metaphor, you're the one that ultimately has got to do that. Now, some people, when they're pushed out of the nest, crash and burn, okay? And most of us don't, though. But you need that dependency is a pathology, and we need and we're there many times in our lives, but we find ways to work out of it. The other point I wanted to make was when we spoke about the various, when I was speaking about necessary causes for action. Remember necessary and sufficient, and gate or gate? Okay. Necessary causes for action. And when I was talking about the order in which you could do physical, logical, or emotional, form follows function. I was trying to do it, and I'm saying one of the things that I don't recall mentioning that I usually do, though, and that is that I'm going to urge you don't. Well, it goes on with if it doesn't work for you, it must not work for anyone else. But don't be too quick to judge. Okay, there isn't a hierarchy there. Now I can say that. And yet it was obvious in looking at the tape that my comfort zones were pretty much such that any of the examples that I gave, when it had anything to do comparing emotional to either physical or logical, the examples were not in the best of light. And one of you pointed out, and I had not used the example before, faith healing. Okay, the spirit over the body. There are many good examples. Gut feeling, the spirit over, or the emotion over the logic, if you will. There are many. There is no one right progression. Okay, some of us will be able to take action, and that's what we're trying to do, whether you're an engineer or a business person. You're trying to get people to take action. And so some of us will take action directly. It's sufficient. I can broadcast on a physical frequency, shut up and fly wing, as they say in the Air Force. Don't need any more cognitive input. Don't need to feel congruent with my heart and where we're going. You're going to fly wing. Okay? Some of you can do that immediately, and that's fine. Some of you might need to understand what it is we're doing and then emotionally be congruent with it. My point is that there is no one right progression of physical, logical, and emotional combinations in order to get stuff done. Okay? Now, as a quick pop quiz, why are we learning anything here? To take action. Okay, there's only two answers in this course, folks. Okay. To take action. Okay, to take action. The first two meetings we covered Chapter 3, taking action, because I want to set the stage for some of the boring stuff we're going to learn in these next few weeks. Okay, definitional stuff, do an integral or two. Dropping sink all over the place. Okay. And when we start to talk about some of the other definitions and theoretical stuff, you've got to process that from the perspective that we're teaching this stuff, we're learning this stuff in order to take action. Yes, in one voice. Okay, take action. Before we go into the action-oriented stuff, any questions on Chapter 3, which was Lesson 1 and Lesson 2? And I didn't bother answering some emails that said, where's Lesson 2? Lesson 1 covered Lesson 2, so I wasn't going to put it up there twice. Okay, so if you were here, that should be obvious. Okay, so any questions on Chapter 3? Whenever I having written a number of things, it's amazing when, and again, this is not a knock on literature class or anything, but I'm amazed when small groups of people study my books and my works and then meet with me afterwards and we discuss them. You got questions and they say, yeah, this is great, or I didn't understand it, or this is a bunch of crap, or whatever. But I find that I think back into the literature courses I had when they asked me, well, what do you think Shakespeare what meant by that? And now I know nobody knows what the heck. I mean, you got your opinion. I wrote the book, wrote a number of them, and the people come and say, wow, that was a brilliant thought. Now, I didn't have a clue. I didn't intend that, but if you got that out of it, that's great. That's fantastic. So I learn as well based on your questions. So you can go trash the literature courses. Okay. No questions on 3, Chapter 3. Okay. Showtime. Let's see if this is, can we put the good old laser disc up on the camera? Good. I had mentioned, just briefly, well, I had mentioned one of the things that we're going to learn to balance. I'll quickly step over here, right through the thing again. One of the things we're going to learn to balance, and we've got an appropriate balance indicated here, is, let me start over. Okay. In my research, since this is a quality management course, okay, so in my research on the various perspectives of quality management, different gurus have said different things about what they consider important, but I wouldn't just narrowly stereotype it to quality management, even though we haven't defined quality yet. I've got a very huge world-conquering view of what quality encompasses, but we'll put it on management, the broad subject of management, even managing engineers. Okay, if you look at all of the hundreds of characteristics that one might use to manage organization, manage people, manage processes, what we're going to talk about today, I've come up with a handful that I think if you make these things visible, you're going to be able to really be a world-class company. Guarantee it. Okay, real easy. Okay, so we're going to start off with one set of characteristics. I don't want to call them measures. I don't want to imply that they're third, fourth decimal place accurate. So I'll call them characteristics. The first set of characteristics is, and I may have mentioned it, but in my practice in helping folks improve, there are two major processes that I use. One is the process, certainly, of continual improvement. Since we're talking about quality, that might be probably an obvious one to deal with. But the other is balanced with constancy of purpose. A balance of constancy of purpose and continual improvement. We haven't studied who Dr. Deming was, but these were a couple of his 14 points. We'll talk about 14 points later in the semester, but these are two of his 14 points. They're also a philosophical dilemma for centuries. Eastern and Western philosophers dealt with, well, do you want things the same? Do you want things to remain constant? Plato saying that the only way you can improve things is if they lay constant under your hand. It's a good metaphor. Okay, constant under your hand. Okay, or do you want things to change, improve? Improvement is change. Okay, so what is it? What do you want? Well, you're going to look to balance those two, and we'll talk about that. One of the things that's going to be key is this constancy of purpose when we talk about what things that we deal with transcend space and time. It'll be happy for the engineers. We're going to talk about space and time. That's all there is in space and time. Okay, so what transcends space and time pretty much are values. Not politically correctness of the stuff, but there's some intrinsic human kinds of stuff that pretty much transcend space, whatever culture you come from, and time throughout all humanity. And so this stuff is going to be very important when you're going to look to what's going to be my oasis in this very turbulent, increasingly cycle time or decreasing cycle time kind of world. Okay? And you're going to be looking to continually improve everything you do to live this value system. Okay? So you're going to look to balance constancy of purpose and continual improvement. That's going to be, and these are the two major, I think I had mentioned these. Yeah, I had mentioned these the first day. We've got constancy of purpose workbook and a continual improvement workbook, and we'll put these on the web at the appropriate time when we cover them. Okay. The continual improvement really is there's a balance between re-engineering or reinventing, that's a big popular word, breakthrough, quantum leap improvements, as well as balancing that with Kaizen use the Japanese word Kaizen, incremental improvements. To use a sports metaphor, you want the big home runs or the bunt singles, okay, something like that, for those of you into sports. Okay, so it's either Kaizen or re-engineering. There's a balance there. You need both. Don't get into the holy wars of saying, by golly, we're looking for breakthrough improvements. No, I just want people in there every day chipping away, continually improving. Okay, so there's a balance there as well. One of the balances that I had mentioned in the previous class was the balance between team and what? Team and the individual. Again, if you've learned about management in Western countries recently, you'd think the team was the thing. it's not necessarily the thing. The individual, you need to balance it with individual. And depending on what culture you're from, you're looking to balance team. Let me see if I can. No, I got to walk. Okay. You're going to look. No, I can't do it. Okay. You're going to look to balance team and individual depending on your culture. If your culture emphasizes team, the nail that sticks up is hammered down. You might want to lift individual to the same high status you hold team, family, in that particular case. Because throughout history, and even with the advances, quote advances in team stuff, some of us are wired to be really creative alone. Okay, and surrounding us with people isn't going to make it any better. Most of the creative stuff has been created by folks in the shower, alone, unfortunately, alone in the shower. Okay, or walking or jogging or whatever. Okay, well, now, yeah, we won't go there. Okay, we'll be like Emerald. Don't go there, folks. Okay, so you're looking at balancing team and individual. Okay, we're going to talk about this a lot. Depending on your culture, you might think the long terms of stuff. I mean, for a number of years when we were holding Japan as the epitome of what we should be doing, it's all teamwork, it's all long-term thinking. I mean, you look in your business plans and we've got a 100-year plan for business, and we're over here thinking, I can't even figure out what we're going to do tomorrow. They say, by golly, we've all got to think long-term. Well, every decision you make, whether you're an engineer or whether you are a business person, you're going to have to balance long-term and short-term to some extent. And all I can do is, and the advice I gave the U.S. auto industry was okay, recognize that your decisions are pretty much skewed to the short term. What can you do to begin chipping away so as you don't compromise the long term to the extent that you have? And likewise in Japan we say, okay, your decisions are emphasizing the long term, but you're depriving yourself of some short-term opportunities. What can you do to not keep this thing out of whack? And it's going to be relative. I mean, some of you, if you're in engineering research, your cycle times are measured in decades, even maybe years. Let's say it used to be decades a month ago. Okay, so your cycle times are measured in years. Okay, if you're an accountant, financial banker, your cycle times are measured in nanoseconds. And what can I do to arbitrage the money or play the spreads? Okay, so you're looking to the time is relative. Okay, time is relative. I get one of the things my advice when people say, okay, how long is this stuff going to take? You know, I want to be able to put this on a fast forward email or voicemail. Give me the message. Don't have a bunch of time to do this. How long is it going to take? And I said, well, over here we're out of luck. It's going to take a long time. It'll take about 20 years to really affect the societal stuff we're trying to do. In Japan, it won't take long at all. It's only going to take Japanese people 20 years to do it. And so 20 years to us is an eternity. 20 years to other cultures is a drop in the bucket. Okay, the eagle on Mount Vishnu. Okay, that's long, but you have to know that culture. Okay, yes.
When you were working in Japan, you actually got that reaction from the directors of the corporations implementing a 20-year plan, and you get a lot of this type of affirmative reaction from the boards of directors.
Sure. When I would say 20 years. Yeah.
Because over here it would never fly.
Yeah. No, I know. It's demoralizing, but in fact, when you look at, when you look at change, and I had mentioned in day one, societal change, political change, scientific change. I mean, you get the aha scientific, it changes overnight, but it'll take 20 years to get the measurement system. The scientists arguing about that done. Who wrote the Structure of Scientific Revolutions? Kuhn, Thomas Kuhn. Yeah. Read Thomas Kuhn. Kuhn would be good, but read Popper as well. Sort of a penance. Okay. No, but or the revolution takes place and things are changed, or the big corporate reorganization is changed. The decks are rearranged, but it takes 20 years for the infrastructure to sort out and things to stabilize. So pretty much any way you look, it historically has taken that. Now, will it take that much in the future? I don't know. My guess is that it probably will, because you're dealing with people. The technology's changed, but I don't know any way to finesse the opinions, the momentum and inertia of people in the emotional sense. Okay, that will sense. Physical stuff. Physical stuff you might be able to do change quickly. You get the aha. Could have had a V8, although you don't. If you don't get it logically, the other one, a proof presented to me with the authority of the greatest logician in the world, is not a proof to me unless I can see it. Okay, and so that's, I think, Schumpeter. Yeah, the economist Schumpeter said that. So you gotta 20 years is demoralizing out west here, but it's a long time. It's not that you can't do ready, fire, aim. We're going to do some quick stuff, but you're going to find, and reading the emails, you folks have also been around the block more than a few times. It's amazing how in industry people keep having the same problems over and over and over again, and they're just playing a shell game and hiding the P and thinking it's going away, and yet it hasn't. So, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. So, the real change is going to take a lot longer than you think you have time for. Okay. Okay, short term versus long term. One of the things that it's pretty obvious now, but a number of years ago when I was asked, how would you define the essence of quality? And typically it was this. It was to reduce waste. You are looking to whether it's reducing defects, whether it's reducing the waste of time, the waste of effort, the waste of materials, the waste of a whole bunch of stuff. The essence of quality was to quit generating waste. Don't make mistakes. Just knock it off. And the systems were structured to feel very good about not having a lack of a negative, if you will. There was no waste, no adverse variance in a budget review. Anyone, the business folks doing accounting or finance majors? Okay. No adverse variance in a budget review. One of the things we found in the early days of Ford, back in the early 80s, our research showed that and we were doing, anyone hear the name of Junichi Taguchi? Anyone know that name? One person. Okay. We'll do some of the Taguchi stuff a little later in the semester. When we speak about a quadratic loss function, I'll introduce the concept today, actually. Everyone up on quadratics? Okay, piece of cake. Okay. So what we found was, and we did a market research at Ford of Europe, and we took a survey of vehicle owners who had no defects. Okay, nothing gone wrong. In the auto industry, they're called things gone wrong. Okay, and we asked the owners, well, how pleased were you with them, with the vehicle? And the data could only support half of the folks that said, yeah, we're pleased as punch. The other half weren't so sure, and I'll later on show you some data that you, in your business, you might want to take a look at balancing the positives with the negatives. Well, in any event, it really spoke volumes at Ford, because all Ford was doing in the early 80s was looking at, well, how can I reduce things gone wrong? How can I reduce waste of whatever people, materials, methods, equipment, and environment? We'll cover those terms real shortly. Much less increase value. What we found was that a lack of a negative doesn't mean a strong positive. Right now, and a lot of people have picked up on the work we did at Ford, right now it's fairly common to talk about, I mean, people have written the book AHA, or the way we put it back in the early 80s was, you want people to brag about your products and services, not complain about them. So you're not looking for your customers to not complain. Well, you don't want them to complain, but even beyond that, the best indicator of whether a person is going to buy your product is whether he or she knows someone who is praising your product or service, not just not complaining. There's a pretty big leverage there also. You're more often to bitch about it than praise it, but when you praise it, that really has a lot of, that carries a lot of weight with all of the people that you know. More effective than the Super Bowl advertising. Not as fun, but okay. So, but the point here is that you've got systems in place, I'm sure, that are feeling very good over a lack of a negative. Well, for instance, does anyone here belong to a culture that says silence is agreement? I was going to say, you spoke to, yeah, I take your silence to be an agreement. Silence has never meant agreement and never will mean agreement. A lack of a negative is not a strong positive.
They say that silence is half agreement. It's not fully agreement. So,
I don't even know if it's half agreement. You could make that case, perhaps. Yeah. Again, if you've ever walked away from a conference table or a board table and no one complained, no one spoke up against it, and you wonder why you didn't get you thought everyone was going to execute smartly. What happened? Again, a lack of a negative. No one disagreed. Think everything must be fine. Lack of a negative isn't a strong positive. Okay? You don't do product or service design by trying to design something based on questions, asking your customers questions of what they don't like. A friend of mine in Australia said, when we dealt with this lack of a negative, not a strong positive, he said straight away, he said, you don't walk into a restaurant and say, tell the waiter, I don't like steak, I don't like broccoli, it was popular a few years ago, and I don't like my potatoes mashed. I told you what I didn't like, you designed me a meal I'm going to love. Okay, you're not going to be able to do that. And yet much of the market research was structured around, what don't you like? You can't do it that way, or you have, and it's a crapshoot in product design. Okay. So, very important. I had mentioned a lack of a negative. Anyone here managed by exception? I mean, much of old management teaching was, by golly, there's too much stuff to bother your head about, so what you need are stoplight control. You need red, yellow, and green to make it real easy, except for the colorblind managers. Real easy to know when there's a problem. So if everything's green or there are no reds, you think everything's going okay. But if there is a red, you're going to manage that by exception. Again, a lack of a negative is not a strong positive, especially in an organization filled with fear. We'll bring in emotion here. What do you think? What kind of data do you think you get in an organization filled with fear?
A lot of green lights.
You think you're going to ever? Okay, you got a boss that comes in, taking badge numbers and kicking ass. You got any problems? Not me. No problems here, folks. No problems. If I did, if you got problems, I can bring people in here who can manage this place. Okay, so what kind of data you get? Well, you get really misleading data, or you get data that they don't have a clue. There's no exceptions to report, no problems here, and you go down the tubes. But they'll get transferred before. Okay, okay, so you got, this is a very important one. I mean, all of your systems are pretty much focused, all of your management systems, as we'll talk about before the end of the semester, are pretty much focused on eliminating the negative. And not too many of them, including market research, are dealt with increasing the positive. They don't have a clue what it takes to get your customers to brag. There's a lot of talk nowadays, again, of political correctness that what do they call it? The reductionist thinking of analysis. I mean, every kid, every engineer today probably got the calling because you were able to take stuff apart, and some of you were able to put it back together. Okay, and so you learn stuff by taking things apart. Well, someone says, yeah, but it's the interactions, it's the synthesis. Okay, that's important. Okay, it's what you get when you put all those parts together. The whole might be greater than the sum of its parts. I was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and so you don't want to get into snow stories with me, nor do I want to think about that. In any event, my grandfather, when Henry Ford was alive, he and his brother had some of the first cars in the Upper Peninsula before they had any kind of roads except for horses and whatever. And they bought one of the first cars and had it shipped up. And it starts to snow in the Upper Peninsula about, I don't know, 7th of July? Yeah. So it's snowing there now. And it melts the end of June. So it's got a pretty intense cold cycle there. In any event, around this time of year, when it got cold, they'd take the car apart and wrap it in burlap and put it in the root cellar, and then take it out for the spring thaw and put it back together. And they wrote Henry Ford a letter. They loved Ford's cars because they told Henry that when they put it back, they put it back together in the spring and had parts left over, and the thing would still run. So good engineers. So you, by taking stuff apart, putting it back together, that's fine, but you also need to look at the synthesis, looking at the system as a whole. You get more than the sum of its parts, and you get learnings that you can't see by taking it apart because it's not there. Any are engineers covering synthesis, synthetic reasoning, synthetic design? Covering that? Certainly the business folks aren't, but okay, just okay. Still taking stuff apart. Okay. And then, and this is one I put really. It's more of the tripartite, quite frankly, the physical action, logical knowledge, if you will, and you have to have the third emotion in there. But when you're trying to balance in the logical loop knowledge and action, can any of the engineers tell me who Charles Steinmetz was? Steinmetz? Any electrical engineers here? No electrical engineers. Okay. Steinmetz, an old guy, decades ago, died in the mid-50s. Premier electrical engineer, a number of the formulas. If you call my bluff, I couldn't tell you the formula that he came up with. So. However, if you'd like to find out, that'd be a good research project, if you have the question. In any event, as legend goes, Steinmetz had just retired in the early 50s. Died a couple years after that, but he had retired from GE and as the preeminent engineer. And one of GE's big facilities went down. Okay, something was wrong, and all the king's horses and men couldn't put it together, couldn't get it to run. And so as a last resort, they called in Steinmetz. And Steinmetz came in and asked some questions, listened to answers, couldn't listen to the machinery because nothing was running, and he's walking around and talking to folks, and he stops, and he takes a piece of chalk out, and he puts an X on the top of a piece of equipment, puts a chalk in his pocket, and goes home. A few weeks later, he sends GE a bill for $10,000. It's a lot of money in 1950. It's a lot of money now. GE's accountants were not unlike your accountants. They weren't going to pay the bill unless you had an invoice or receipt for what it is, itemized invoice. And so Steinmetz puts on the receipt chalk, 50 cents. Knowledge to put the chalk where it should have been put, $9,999.50. Okay, so he itemized it. So I'm talking about knowledge and action. The only reason you're acquiring knowledge is why? To take action. It's not exactly a balance there, but you got to do something with it. Okay?